Hello, everyone, and welcome to Module 3 of the Body Wisdom Activation. So, here we are. We are present in this real moment from Module 1. We have began to gather our awareness to be really observant of the sensation we're experiencing, the experience of our physical body, and we've been practicing building resilience with how we stay, how we breathe, how we continue to experience that sensation and stay with it so that we can begin to become conscious of the more subtle energy, of the patterns, of the ruts, of the things that are there that are impeding in one way or another more harmonious energy flow. So now we're ready to deepen into that exploration of how we move the energy, how we move what's stuck, how we begin to work with in a deeper way that how that energy is mucking up the system. I say it like that because oftentimes people will talk about it in terms of a block. And the truth is that sometimes you could see it as a block. Sometimes it's energy moving too fast because it's overcompensating for a block in another place, or sometimes it's distorted. It's more like a warble through the field. So I just like to say, whatever is causing it to not be in its most harmonious flow. Right. So presence gives us access, sensation gives us information, and now emotion is what happens when we begin to work with moving that sensation. We begin to work with energy, emotion, and energy in motion. And emotion is really when a feeling is moving. And so oftentimes this is what we're working with is the movement of feelings, because the way we begin to experience sensation, the next level of experience and sensation, like we talked about in module 2, is like an emotion that comes up, or is a feeling that arises, and then that feeling moves through us as an emotion. And so how do we work with that? Is there anything that's keeping us stuck in that feeling rather than allowing it to move all the way through? So everything in this module really builds from that foundation that we've created so far. So before emotion becomes a story or a label or a narrative, it begins just as that raw physiological activation. And I really like to name it as an activation, per one of my main teachers, Anadea Judith, who likes to describe the moments that we have a reaction, a physiological response to something that happens in our world as an activation. So we really take labeling off of it, right? There is just an awareness that my body is activated. So rather than putting it in the box of a certain emotion or feeling or experience, I am just recognizing that I am in an activated space. And that can be really helpful as you move forward because it centers it just in the present awareness and can help you move through it in a more efficient way, unless there's something else there. But you can begin to discern then, right? Rather than immediately jumping to a label, immediately maybe just in the experience that reminds you of something else that's hearkening to something else. We can just be in the present experience. So we'll get into that. But so it begins as this raw physiological activation, and that might be experienced as like we've talked about, right? A tightening in the throat, a burning in the chest, a rush of energy in the belly, maybe a rush of heat through the system, a collapse behind the heart. Emotion then rises from sensation, and then the mind begins to assign meaning. So this distinction really matters because the nervous system can complete something the mind is still trying to understand. And that's why if the mind gets involved too quickly, it can make something continue longer. So, neuroscience shows us that it takes about 90 seconds for the body to metabolize an activation, right? A physiological wave of feeling. And that's 90 seconds. But this is what we witness animals do. When an animal, you'll see like maybe a dog get activated, another dog comes into their experience. When that situation completes, though, you'll see them often like have a shake, and then they're done. It's over. They are able to move through the 90-second arc of feeling, move that activation through to completion within a matter of seconds, because they aren't adding fuel to the fire through the story, through the mental activation. So when the mind gets involved, now, like we've talked about, right, it can stir up hours and hours, days and days, months or years of validation, of data to fuel what just happened and the reasoning for keeping it in activation. And that's even if it's conscious, right? Sometimes it's completely unconscious, but we just keep refueling with like, oh, and then remember when this was said, and remember when that was said, and remember when they did this or they did that. And we keep the mental game then is like fuel to the feeling, fuels the feeling over and over and over again, long past when the situation was over. So what keeps us in an emotional state longer than the 90-second arc once something is complete isn't the feeling itself, it's the mental loop that we attach to it. And this mental loop is often from previous experiences that did not come to completion. And we talk about this a lot in trauma conversations, but it definitely is a response to trauma. But it can be little t, big T. It could be something that was known as trauma, but it can also be something that we didn't necessarily know as trauma, that wasn't maybe even, it could be categorized as trauma, but it was something where we kept the feeling locked up and we did not bring it to completion. And so it is going to stay there within us saying like, I want to complete. Hey, remember me? I want to complete. Right. And so, we need to untangle the sensation from the story, from the whatever it's attached to that is fueling it, and then take ourselves in consciously through the completion. And we're able to do that. So this is partially just practicing that on a regular basis when we are able to not be caught up in the mental loop. And then it's also, being aware of what's there, what energy, what feeling has stagnated within me, has caused the warble, has caused the block that I need to bring to completion. That might take, it might be simple. It might take a little bit of effort. It might take me having to sit with it and look at it again and again and again, and maybe move through that. Like, I'm going to circle back to it in the spiral of learning. I'm going to circle back to it and I'm going to come at it with fresh eyes. And then maybe I move away from it and I come back to it with fresh eyes, and I move away from it and I come back to it with fresh eyes. And this is oftentimes how we evolve through things, grow through things that are like big things in our life, or that are maybe even things that we're activating around, that are part of our lineage, part of our ancestry, part of our greater cultural experience, maybe embedded in our soul, like something that we've journeyed through past lives. And so these become bigger themes for this life and aren't something that we necessarily can easily traverse through in 90 seconds, or just go, oh, interesting, that's what that was. And now it's cleared. Right now it's fine. We might need to revisit it time and time again. And many clients I've worked with, something I've noticed in my own life, of course, too, is that things will reappear. The big themes in our life will reappear, and they might even reappear our entire life. We get more efficient at it. We look at it, we notice it differently, and we've usually learned something between those contacts with it that give us a new way of working with it that we need to do. So staying with this, I'm going to stick with this location of something that is incomplete within us for just a moment before we move on to how to work with it. So I really like Peter Levine's work for this. He really works with the somatic experiencing of trapped feelings, trapped experience, trapped trauma. And he talks a lot about that, an animal's ability to discharge the body from the activation, right? So when you're activated, you have a charge that comes into you. This is very much something Anodea Judith talks about a lot. She has a wonderful book about this. And then, when we're able to discharge that, move that charge out, we come back to neutral. And we can do that relatively quickly if it is something we've become efficient at, and if we can easily look at something and then move it through, right? So or we can know how to work with it. And so we can see this, like I said, through animals where they shake, they convulse, they tremble, they run. They might have like the zoomies, right? And they move it outside of themselves and they return to baseline relatively quickly. So the one thing I want to talk about one piece of Peter Levine's research that I think is really important, really interesting to center right now. He was looking at groups of people who all experienced a trauma together, and then looking at their various responses to it over time. And what he found was that the majority of people in these traumatic group experiences had a very similar way that they were experiencing PTSD, essentially, and had these like trapped feelings in them that were, symptomatic in different ways, presenting in different ways in each of their lives, but very similar in that there was something there that was really distorting, holding them back, like causing them to live their life differently than if that trauma had not happened. And then there were one or two people in each group that had a completely different experience and were not having any impact from the trauma, and had in fact maybe even been able to reframe it so that it was this like kind of more like not necessarily a positive experience. Like I'm sure they probably wished it hadn't happened still, but they were able to utilize it, if you will. And these people who didn't witness themselves in the same way or hold it in the same way, did not have it necessarily still like trapped within them. They were the ones in the group who had activated and used and taken action, right? So it was the person in maybe a situation where 30 people are trapped, the person who figured the way out and helped everyone out. So they took action and they were able to utilize the charge and they did something with it. And then as they did something with it, his take on it, Peter Levine's take on it, is that they then discharged. And so then they didn't have as much held in that experience. And because they had been able to complete the activation while they were still in it. So it changed the trajectory of that experience for them compared to everybody else. And so that's really powerful to know, because then, we can work with these things that have happened in our past, but we can also, begin to explore a different way of holding our present experiences, holding the things that we will experience now, we'll experience in the future. We can be aware of our activation and work to move it discharge it in whatever way possible and whatever timing is possible, right? More in the moment. That happens from that present awareness, from the experience of the body. So, wow, I know I'm activated in this moment. What do I want to do with that, right? We'll talk about that. So, once physiological activation rises, the mind begins to make that meaning. And so that's where if if we're able to just stay in the physical experience and move it, go dance, go run, shake, literally shake, like some people practice shaking, right? To feel, to do something to move the energy. You could drink a glass of water, take a shower, like move the energy, without the mental mind, without the mind getting in the game, then and then you can watch like a wave it crest and then begin to dissipate, and you can bring yourself to completion. If, however, the mind gets involved, which often happens when it has triggered something from the reserves, something that's stuck within, it's in the movement of energy in your body, hit a wall, it's hit a warble, it's hit something that isn't allowing it to flow through and just simply discharge. And the mind then is making meaning, right? It's connecting it to that thing. It's connecting it to past memories. It's saying, oh, I know this activation. I know this charge. This is anger. This is grief. This is anxiety. This is danger. There's a threat. This might never end, right? Like we can really get trapped in a story of it. And so the story is not the enemy, but if we attach too quickly, we interrupt the energetic cycle. So emotion gets stuck, not because it's too much, but because it's too interrupted. I'm going to say that again. Emotion gets stuck, not because it's too much, but because the flow, the movement, the discharge is too interrupted. And stuck emotional energy will often feel in the body like a part of the body that's shut down. It'll feel like chronic tension. It'll feel like irritability or anxiety, reactivity, looping thoughts, like ruminating. And but when we let the energy move before we assign meaning, something new becomes possible. Okay. But if that's not possible and we hit that wall, and we recognize, oh, this is a bigger thing. My energy is interrupted. This moment, I can be aware that that there's something else here, because I'm aware enough in this present moment to recognize that this activation in my body is maybe bigger than what this situation, this moment calls for. And so then I do that exploration. What am I bumping into? And it's a lot like one of my teachers described it as these little parts of ourselves that are sitting in like these igloos in our body. And we're stuck in these like frozen bubbles. And so we need to identify like who's in there and what's that experience. And this can be a process, like we talked about. We don't want to do it too quickly. We don't want to move back into the trauma by just like shattering that igloo and saying like, who's in there, right? We want to greet the edge, greet the edge, greet the edge. And what happens as we do that, as we greet the edge, is it's like holding warm hands on an ice cube. It just begins to melt. And then when it becomes too much, it's too much to hold, that ice cube becomes too cold for our hands, we set it down and we walk away. And maybe we even wait until we're brought back into that experience, when we're called back into connection with that ice cube. Or maybe we say like, ooh, I just became aware of something that's really important in me to address. And it's big to hold, and I really want to move into it. I'm going to make space to sit with that each day myself, or I'm going to get a guide who is going to assist me to move through that, who can hold a container for me to really, that's safe for me to explore it and move through it and help guide the process. This is really powerful. So many times I've hit this wall in my life, and without a trusted guide that I can lean on, it probably would have taken me a lot longer, and probably been a lot harder. I'm wondering, I'm probably, I mean, I think we're all capable of that. I think we're all our own healer, but having these spaces that are like these containers, whether individually or group, they can really assist in giving us a safe place, a safe way to move this energy that can feel a little bit more difficult to access, a little bit more difficult to even maybe witness. And it's like adding a few more hands to the ice cube, it melts a little bit more. And so we begin to free that energy and we work with it over time. Maybe we have to move through it again and again and again, because maybe it's a really large, dense ice cube. Maybe it's a really big, protective igloo that was created to protect us, right? So we hold it with so much compassion, with so much grace. We honor it. Thank you. Thank you, igloo. Thank you, ice cube, right? And now I'm ready to begin the process to free this energy, to liberate this energy. And when we bring our presence, when we bring our breath, when we bring our attention, and we create safety so that that ice can begin to melt, more of our light is liberated. So here's the key. Every time we come back to the same place in the body, we arrive there with new eyes, a new level of capacity, and a new layer of self, and so we invite a new layer of opening, a new layer of liberation within ourselves. And each loop melts a new layer and opens a new possibility. So it's not repetition. We aren't repeating the process over and over again, like hitting our head against the wall. That's what we're doing when we aren't bringing our consciousness to it, when we aren't bringing our awareness and our presence and into the physical body, into the experience. That is when we're hitting our head against the wall, moving through the same circle over and over again. When we begin to bring this process into play, that's when we begin to thaw it. And so we arrive each time ready for the next layer. And this is how emotional energy returns to flow, returns to the harmonious motion that we seek. So when the ice melts, when the stuck energy returns to flow, we gain greater access to our emotional intelligence, to our ability to regulate our nervous system with greater ease, greater efficiency. We have more relational capacity because we have more space for ourselves. We'll have more space for others, more of our authenticity. Every time we free more of our inner light, we free more of our authentic energy to move through, which also means that we become more coherent with ourselves and with the things that are aligned with us in our life. And so then we have greater choice over how we show up in this world, because we're not on autopilot being guided by these past stories and energies that have been holding and locking away parts of us. So this is where energy work really becomes alchemical, because when that stuck energy melts and moves, we are able to create new channels of flow in the body. And those channels invite more light to move through. So they brighten us. We become more radiant in ourselves. Our light begins to radiate in a brighter way. And as we brighten the world around us. So when we have emotion, it isn't there to overwhelm us or drown us. It isn't bad. It's meant to move us. And then what we do with that movement is where wisdom and power and light enter. And it is when we begin to show up with that fullness of meaning, that fullness of purpose, that full radiance that begins to touch the world around us. I will see you in module 4.